I am in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people, otherwise known as Nova Scotia in Canada. We're talking about communal belonging today. And one of the things we started talking about, or the theme, I suppose you could say, for the November, for this month, the topics, is communal experiences. And so we looked at intergenerational trauma, COVID-19, and this next week we're going to work more directly with kindness and compassion and connection with people. So this one kind of comes into this. There's a lot of experiences that we have that are very difficult. And some of those are really personal in a sense of there's not a lot of people that are experiencing the same thing. It might be that we've had a breakup in an important relationship, or we've been diagnosed with an illness or something like that that's kind of personal. It isn't as widespread. And then there's also the experiences that we all have, like the child that's comforting the other one who's crying. The way that we comfort each other is something that is really good for us to know and to remember, that we turn towards each other and we get comfort from each other. And sometimes it's hard for us to remember that, partly because right now with the pandemic, we're not allowed to move about the same way we used to. And although it's getting a little bit more open now, we've had over a year and a half of restricted movement. And then the movement we do have towards each other is still not as usual as it used to be. It's not as easy, perhaps, as it used to be. A lot of that has to do with our nervous system. So if we go back to our evolution and how we evolved, that really explains a lot of how we're reacting now and why our nervous systems are having trouble. So we were in small hunter-gatherer tribes, 30, 50, maybe 100 people would be a big one. The groups of people were kept very small because of the resources that were available. Threats were mostly physical, like the tiger coming out behind the bush. And some people in the group were very hypervigilant and always kind of looking around. Maybe they had good eyesight or good hearing, and they warned the other people of a threat. Other people were more connecting. They noticed the other people. They included people. They were more nurturing. So everybody had a role in the family or in the tribe, and different people brought different things to it. So we evolved to take these cues from each other. Anybody who didn't learn that, or who didn't trust that, who didn't focus on being connected with the family, with the band that they were in, would not have survived. There was a lot of threats at that time. And if you didn't pay attention to the one who said, don't go that way down to the river for water, then you probably were eaten by something. So it was very harsh and very immediate. And that's how we evolved. That's how our nervous system evolved. One of the reasons that I brought that up is because if we're around somebody who's anxious, we get anxious too. And it's because we evolved to take these cues from each other. If someone is hardly breathing or breathing kind of short or choppy, we interpret that as there's something wrong, there's some kind of danger here. So we had to balance, just as we do now, the need for safety. And Dr. Stephen Porges talks about that. We are completely safe if we're in our own home and there's nobody around to hurt us. However, we evolved to communicate with each other, to connect with each other. Plus, we have to go out and into the world, even if it's now as we get groceries. But we have to connect with other people. But we also have an evolutionary drive to connect with other people. And then the other point I wanted to bring up is even if a certain group of people were very peace-like, they were also really affected by the tribes around them. So if we're surrounded by communities of peaceful people who have similar values to us, then we feel safer. But of course, that's not how it is. There's always some groups that are more warlike, that are greedier, that want to dominate other tribes, or maybe who want to take those resources that are available and keep them for themselves. So that's something that if we look through history, hundreds of thousands of years, we can really see how some of these developed, some of these traits developed. So we feel safer, whether it's, somebody who's going to come to our side if we're being bullied. That's a picture there of some Navy SEALs. We feel safer when we're included in a group. Neighborhoods watch out for each other. We have block watch. So we rely on each other in part so that we don't have to be always on guard. So if we know that I can't possibly know everything that there is, but a group of us together could be safer, because then somebody will watch out for me and I'll watch out for them. And it used to be very much like that in neighborhoods. I don't know. I'm sure there are still neighborhoods like that now. So my grandchildren grew up in one of those where there's several houses in a row where the adults all know each other, they socialize, and the kids go in and out of each other's homes, and people are kind of watching out for each other. So that's ideal when we have that connection and we feel that safety of a group. And as there got to be more of a population, people grew and began living in cities. So part of that happened with the Industrial Revolution. We're going back to our history classes now. But we formed these collective agreements of being in a city, a village, a state, a country, a global community, certainly a global community now. And we form these collective agreements, which are called laws and governments. We elect people if we're in a democratic country. People in some countries have universal health care, where it's a value of that country that everybody pays a little bit more in taxes so that we can all have access to health care. And as we look at this, the United States is one of the only developed countries in the world that doesn't really have that. And yet our hearts go out to people. So we still, in Canada, there was major flooding in the western part of Canada earlier in the week, and people want to help. We donate money, we donate time. People who had a boat went out and were helping with rescues. And so there was a government response to it and a military response to it. But then there's that individual neighbors helping neighbors. So that's something that we can also remember when it looks like nobody cares about us, or when it looks like we're really out of sync. Something happens and we really see how polarized people are. That neighbor to neighbor, person to person, and often government to government as well, we do really want to help, and we feel connected in a way that makes us want to do that. And then, of course, we get the complicated parts of things where some people are included in the protection and some people aren't. So some people and groups are marginalized. Racism, homophobia, certainly gender inequality. So then we also have social justice movements. And one of the things that so many people talk about right now is the inequity that was revealed during COVID. So why is it that more people of color get COVID and die from COVID? Some of that has to do with income. Some of that has to do with where they live, with mistrust of authority. A lot of it has to do with, there's just so many complicated reasons why people are in the situations that they're in. And then we have mass groups of people like the Women's March that happened after Trump was elected. So we have these social movements, the labor movements. If we look at labor movements, what we're really looking at is having a connection or a communication and a feeling of, these are my people who also have a similar economic status. So, people in poverty or people who are in the working class or the middle class have more in common with each other across race and location and all kinds of other things than we do with someone who has billions of dollars. So we can group together in ways that we're insiders with people who are like us. And it's not really what what the people who are trying to exploit us want. So they're always going to try to marginalize us and separate us and make us feel like we're not actually, we can't actually trust other people. So that seems to also be one of the qualities of the nervous system and of human culture. And it's not a good quality, is that we get exploited thinking that we have more in common with somebody who's a billionaire than somebody else who's in the same or similar kind of income strata than we are. So these social justice movements really are important and are longstanding and persistent. And then on an individual basis, as we look at what our life is like, we can come and just kind of see that. Several weeks ago, we worked with this active hope, this optimism. And hope is something that you have, but something that we do. So if we were to look at hope as something that we do, we could look at how is it that I'm feeling? How am I feeling separated? How am I feeling connected? How am I feeling powerless? How am I feeling like what could change that? So that we could be acting. The other day on Friday, there was the verdict of Kyle Rittenhouse, who was found not guilty on all of the counts after shooting and killing 2 people in a demonstration. And so many people were kind of gut punched by that, as it makes sense that we are. So how can we not go into despair when these things are happening? We look at the climate emergencies that are happening. How can we not go into despair so that we can act? And so what I'm kind of working with through these slides, and we're going to get into the inquiry in a moment, is how can we be present with ourselves in our own body, our own situation that we're in? How can we connect with other people who are like-minded in a broader sense, perhaps, than what we might normally think of? And how can we take action together to kind of mitigate or lessen that feeling of powerlessness, to give us that sense of, yes, I could band together with people who care about climate change. I could band together with people who care about all of these different things that we care about. We care about them so deeply. So let's go into the inquiry. So we'll take our time with this inquiry. We're really looking at, we have these experiences and we turn to each other. And if we have a trauma background where it wasn't safe to turn to each other, or where we reached out and we were hurt, or that bid for connection wasn't met, then it's not going to be something that we maybe naturally do. So let's take a moment there and just kind of sit with that. What is your experience? Do you tend to turn to other people when something happens? Do you tend to go into a flight response? You go home, you go under the covers. Maybe you get really busy working. When it comes time to talk with somebody, is that a relief? Is it something that you dread? What's your experience with this sense of community or communal belonging? Do you turn to other people? And notice what that feels like in your body. My experience with this sometimes is that we have a different idea about this than what actually plays out in our life. And part of that is because some of this is social and relational, and sometimes our experience on a broader level is different. So if you were thinking, for instance, of maybe your building is evacuated because of a fire alarm. Maybe there isn't a fire, maybe there is. But when you look around the people that are out there with you, if you were to bring that to mind, or some example maybe similar to that, it's not personal relationship, it's more a little bit wider, the community of people that are in your neighborhood or nearby. So how would you feel as you're kind of milling about and standing there? Are you meeting people's eyes? Are you looking to other people? I wonder what's going on. Did anyone see anything? I didn't see any smoke on my end of the apartment. Did you? What's your kind of sense? And let it just kind of come to life in your mind for a moment. There's some kind of an emergency and people are gathering together. And notice as you're watching those thoughts or bringing those memories up or those visualizations, notice your breath, notice your body. Anytime you want, you could step back, take a few breaths, look around the room. And then let that kind of settle for a moment. And now bring forward something with a similar group of people, only it's not an emergency. Maybe this time it's a block party or a Christmas party or some kind of an event. And this time it is social. And when you think about interacting with that same group of people, is there any difference? So this time you would know ahead of time. So you would know if you're looking forward to it, if you're dreading it, maybe a mixture. If there was a block party, would you go? Would you be anxious about going? What would your experience be, and how does that feel in your body? And one of the things we experience personally, as well as see on the media all the time, is people very generously and often at some risk moving out into supporting each other. Strangers taking care of each other. And not even thinking about, did this person vote right wing, left wing? Just connecting on a human level. So it's not like those other things don't matter at times. They certainly do. But just notice that we have both kinds of experiences. If you were at a political rally, someone's politics would matter very much. If you're facing some kind of danger, maybe not as much. And if you're noticing that you're kind of engaged or there's a lot of intensity in thought, you could always do some tapping. Take your attention away from the thoughts for a moment. Just tap on your forehead. Notice the sound, the sensation. You could have your eyes open, looking around the room. Notice cues of safety. And then let's kind of move into something that's a little bit more personal in terms of the Me Too movement. So one of the things that happened during that, this is several years ago now, 3-4 years ago, I can't remember exactly. But one of the things that happened is that somebody would share something on Facebook and a lot of people would comment. Thousands of people sometimes would comment. And so part of this that I'm thinking about came up around the Brett Kavanaugh hearings for Supreme Court judge in the United States. So there's a woman who's saying, this happened to me. This is not a suitable person to be a Supreme Court judge. Some people were saying, I don't believe her. It was too far long ago. He shouldn't be punished for what he did when he was in college. Other people are saying, no, I do believe her. I believe that what she's saying is right. And so a lot of people would come onto these comment threads and talk about it individually with each other as well. A lot of people would say, this is my experience. And then our experience would be validated by other people. So just notice if that kind of brings up anything that was happening for you at that time. And you don't have to be a woman to be affected by that as someone who's experienced some kind of coercion or assault or violence. Although generally speaking, more men perpetrate violence against women, but it's not completely that way either. A lot of adults or people who are stronger perpetrate that on children or people who are not as physically strong. So this is an experience that many people have, either directly or we know somebody. And notice what that feels like as you're just bringing that to mind. And if you don't want to bring it to mind, just kind of back away from it. We're only going to stay here for a moment. Notice your breath. You could hold your hands, give yourself some support. And so just to notice, how do you feel when you think about connecting with other people, being validated? Our experience can be validated by other people. When someone says, I believe you, thank you for sharing that. I believe you. And notice if it's okay to breathe. Let yourself kind of settle. So we have this feeling of belonging in many different ways. One of it is location. We all live in the same apartment building or neighborhood. And so we have a feeling of connection with that. And it's a tenuous connection. We might have much stronger feeling of safety if we're all banded together against something like a fire. We might have much more dread and anxiety if we're banding together around a block party or some kind of an event. Just to notice we have all of these complexities, these complex relationships with each other. When we work someplace, we have a little community there, or maybe a big one. And some of those people will feel very safe to us and some won't. So we're always negotiating. Where do we belong? How does that feel to belong, and how does it feel to not belong? So you might belong in the sense of we're all doing a similar job and we all have a similar income. None of us are billionaires. But maybe you feel you don't belong because you're gay or something, or you're of a race that's not in the majority. So you have that awkwardness. We're just looking at different ways that we belong and don't belong. And then if we change to a different topic now, COVID brought a whole new environment that we're in. Many people right now are still talking about, I just feel tired as we move into the winter. And COVID is, again, on the rise in a lot of places. Europe is having a lot of trouble. A lot of the numbers are rising. So a lot more people are vaccinated, and still new variants are coming through. So what is it that we're noticing in our nervous system? We have this communal experience, and where we stand on, do we believe COVID is real? Are we denying COVID? Do we believe that we have a responsibility to each other to try to keep each other safe? So in that case, we're masking, we're taking more care, we're following the guidelines around social distancing. Or are we just like, no, I don't believe that, or I'm not interested in that. I'm sick and tired of staying at home. I'm going to go out and do what I want. So just to notice, what is your experience personally with that? So we have this broader setting of a global pandemic, and then we have our own individual experience with it. So let's take some time here just to kind of settle in. What's the state of your nervous system right now? And what about other people around you? So when you think about the other people, can you count on them the way you usually do? Or are they kind of tapped out as well? That's a really big impact right now. A year and a half into this, a lot of people are feeling really tired. And stay connected with your body. Notice your breath. And notice that even with the exhaustion many people are feeling, notice if you do have the opportunity to talk with other people about how you feel. How does that change the experience? I was speaking with someone the other day who works in the school system, and she was saying that all the teachers just seem really, really stressed, even more than they were before. And it was good to talk about it and kind of validate each other's perceptions. It makes it less personal. It's not like I'm a failure because I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed, or I notice I'm not as resilient as I am normally. So we have this complex interplay of social and physical safety, of our nervous systems and how they evolved over millennia, what they evolved for, and how they're really not very suited to our modern life in many ways. The threats in modern life are very different than they were even 300 or 400 years ago. We also have people who we can trust in some situations and not in others. We have a feeling that I can't really trust someone who has an attitude that doesn't consider me or my protection or my safety. We probably don't trust Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, to have our good interests at heart, because he's proven, as much as we can tell from what we get in the media, that that's not the case. So just to notice the complexity of this. We feel closer to some people. We feel validated when we have a shared experience. We feel fear when we don't. So let's move right into that emotion for the next few minutes. I feel scared and brokenhearted at times. And that's very likely true for all of us. Might not be our predominant experience. It's certainly an experience that's persistent and returns. I kind of come in and out of that at times. And I can cultivate the willingness to stay engaged. I can cultivate that open-heartedness, the hopefulness. I know, as many of us do, that connecting with other people really, really helps. Even if it's people that we don't agree with. Even if we need to have very strong boundaries. Staying open-hearted and aware of the humanity, even if it feels very underground or hidden or not available in some people. And it's not idiot compassion where we think, oh, yeah, everybody's light and love, and I'm just going to love them and everything's going to be fine. It's not that at all. It's very clear. But could I remain aware of everyone's humanity and stay open-hearted? And notice what that feels like in your body. Take some breaths. You might have your hands on your heart. This is really hard work. It's not our normal times, and it's not our usual, well, it doesn't really matter if I connect with that person or not. It really does matter. It matters to us and it matters to everybody. And can I nourish and protect myself and give myself the environment that I need to build the resilience, to feel more hopeful. And a big part of that is coming here and to other places where we can be honest and connect and experience community. We belong here. Even though we're all very different, we belong here.